welcome to Living Green. You know, some people say they're outstanding in their field. Well, here I am standing in somebody's field, and it's just beautiful out here. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we preserve rural landscapes?
Driving outside cities, one is struck by the combination of working farms and natural areas that occupy the land. These areas not only provide communities with such things as food, materials for clothes, and timber for buildings, but they also serve as habitat for wildlife, they clean our air and water, and they serve as an escape for many people that want to experience nature. However, rural lands are disappearing. Some estimates indicate that 2,400 acres per day are being converted to urban land.
Many farmers and landowners would like their property to remain as is, but the closer urban areas get to this land, the pricier it becomes.
Farmers and landowners are stuck between a rock and a hard place. The incentive to sell land to developers is high because property values skyrocket when the city fringe comes closer. Urban dwellers want to preserve rural landscape, as do many farmers. But how can this happen? What can be done?
One solution is a conservation easement. Farmers are working with local organizations to set up easements on their land.
What is a conservation easement? Essentially, it is a legal agreement that limits the amount of development that can occur on a property. A landowner partners with a land trust organization to set up this agreement. In return for agreeing not to develop the landowner is compensated either by direct payment or a tax write-off. Conservation easements are very flexible. To learn more about conservation easements, we first travel to a small, rural community, Boston, Georgia. Folks like to say this town is the second biggest Boston in the United States. The Boston community is a mixture of farmers, retirees, and people that commute to nearby Thomasville. Many families have lived here for over 3 generations. Conservation easements are not really understood by the general public. However, the Red Hills Conservation Program, associated with Tall Timbers Research Station located near Boston, has been partnering with landowners for over 10 years to set up conservation easements. We met up with Mr. Kevin McGorty, director of the Red Hills Conservation Program, to learn more about how land trust organizations partner with landowners.
The Tall Timbers Research Station was created in 1958. We're a biological research station, nonprofit, located out of just north of Tallahassee, Florida. We are noted for fire ecology management and fire studies, but also game management. And back in 1989, we created a land trust to try to save this distinct landscape. The mission of the Red Hills Conservation Program is to protect the natural, cultural, and rural land use traditions of this distinct area. It's about a 300,000 acre area, 6 counties, 3 counties in Georgia, 3 counties in Florida. And of the 300,000 acres, nearly 50% has been conserved through conservation easements and other land protection strategies over the last 15 years. I'm an urbanite. I love the urban environment, but I like saving rural countrysides. The rural landscapes really offer protection of natural resources, working landscapes, at prime agricultural lands and forest lands. They offer the urbanites something very important: clean air, clean water, and the beautiful environment of protecting a rural landscape, canopy roads, open space. And so I think there's an interdependence between the urban dweller and those folks who are living a more rural lifestyle in terms of saving these resources.
Preserving rural lands to conserve natural resources is a community-wide goal. But how do conservation easements do this?
Well, the conservation easement has to have a public purpose. Of the thousands of acres that we put in conservation easements, they almost have been exclusively donated easements. So they must meet the IRS requirements of public purpose. In our case, they're protecting natural habitat resources on these working landscapes. The owners still own the property. They can sell the property. They can use their property for farming, for timbering, all of the uses that they currently enjoyed. Our easements prohibit major residential development of the property, both commercial or other forms of development.
What do you think motivates the other landowners to come into the program?
Well, I think it has now become good business to think of conservation as an alternative to development. With the federal tax incentives, the income and the estate tax incentives, it has become sometimes more profitable to keep the land in conservation than to sell it to development. Families are being whacked with heavy estate tax burdens, or they may have disposable income that's taxed through the income tax. But most importantly, people who do a conservation easement really love their land. They want to see it saved for their children and future generations. That's mainly the prime motivation. But the federal tax incentives and some of the new state tax incentives as well are good inducements to think about conservation.
For landowners, what exactly are the monetary benefits of conservation easements? One is income tax reduction. For example, suppose a property is valued at $1 million before a qualified conservation easement is placed on the land. The value of the land then drops to $600,000 after the easement. The total charitable contribution is $400,000, $1 million minus $600,000, and the landowner can deduct $400,000 off their taxes over a period of several years. Second is property tax savings. Depending on the current land use, an easement may result in lower property assessment. That would result in lower property taxes. Third is federal gift and estate tax savings. Land that is qualified as a conservation easement is excluded from the total land value of the estate. As much as 40% of the land value can be excluded up to a limit of $500,000. This decreases tax burden on the heirs. Plus, a conservation easement can be donated to a charitable organization free of federal gift and estate taxes. Fourth, the development rights could be sold to a land trust entity. Here, farmers can get money up front. For example, if the conservation easement reduces the value of the land by $100,000, a willing land trust organization could pay the landowner $100,000 as payment for giving up the rights to develop the land.
This was my grandmother's home here, and we lived in Boston. The house is still standing, and we were right there until we graduated and went away to school. We have 537 acres. Half of that, a little over half, is cultivated, and the rest of it is in timber. We grow cotton and pecans and timber, those three things.
How did it all first start?
And I wanted to leave something, and I wanted something that would be here forever. What the easement says is the kind of thing that I want. It'll preserve it and be here for a while longer. My activities here haven't changed one iota. They're still just like they were before. So, and I don't anticipate any change. In other words, on the timberland, I'll sell timber, and on cotton land, we'll raise cotton, and on pecans, we'll take care of just as we did before.
537 acres have been placed under a conservation easement. To help maintain a healthy environment, Mr. Moody has implemented sustainable farming and timbering practices on the property. To learn more about the ecological value of Mr. Moody's property and some of the sustainable farming practices implemented, we met up with a biologist, Christine Ambrose.
The Red Hills Conservation Program's role in establishing a conservation easement is after we conduct a biological survey, then we compile our data into an easement documentation report, and then we also draft a conservation management plan for the particular community types. In this case, within the upland community type, we promote prescribed fire, which is very important to maintain the ecological integrity of the ecosystem. The native ground cover associated with the longleaf pine wiregrass ecosystem has some of the highest plant species diversity. it has been documented within an acre. About approximately 300 species have been documented. This particular longleaf pine area we designated as a special natural area is 40 acres. Embedded within this are 4 forested wetland dome swamps, which were also designated as special natural areas, and they're embedded within this ecosystem. And those were given other management guidelines as far as no timbering, and again allowing prescribed fire to burn from the uplands down into the wetlands. And timbering, no timbering in the wetlands is very important to maintain the soil, because the soils, again, are soggy and very, very sensitive to disturbance from heavy equipment.
Fire is an important part of the longleaf pine ecosystem, and under the conservation easement, prescribed burns come through the area and open up the understory. But the fire itself doesn't hurt the trees. It does char the bark a little bit, but these trees are adapted to fire.
Approximately 364 acres of the 535-acre easement is under agriculture. And this agriculture is either in cropland or pecans or planted pine. Our management for the cropland, and Mr. Moody has actually incorporated this 8 to 9 years ago, was to use no tillage. No tillage means that instead of bringing in heavy equipment to turn over the soil and to disrupt the soil, that's not being used to turn over the soil. This is very important for the surrounding wetlands that are adjacent to his agricultural land, because it prevents runoff and soil erosion. And it's a wonderful way to do agriculture and to preserve the surrounding wetlands. And this property in particular, his wetlands feed into the Osceola watershed. What struck me about Mr. Moody was his sincerity and how much he loved his property. And I think that's what really inspired me. This was my very, very first conservation easement, and I put a lot of time into it. And that's what really struck me, was his sincerity and his passion and love. It was his baby.
Conservation easements are very flexible. They are a win-win for both the farmer and the public. In this example, Mr. Moody is pleased that the land will be preserved. He will receive a significant income tax deduction as a result of the easement. An important step for any landowner is to contact a local land trust organization to find out more information.
Talking about putting land in a covenant in perpetuity. So it's a family planning process. It's one that needs to be done in consultation with tax advisors and attorneys. And it just should be part of the family planning of an estate, to think of this as a conservation option and to explore it. The Land Trust Alliance through LTA.com has one of the best websites explaining conservation easements, and there's a lot, there's some 1,500 land trusts in the nation, almost one in every region of the country and every community. And the landowner should knock on that door a little bit and ask some questions about conservation options as part of the family planning process.